We got a number of media requests and comments from the general public about what we could possibly do to reverse this quite frankly outrageous and completely ill-advised action by the federal government to through the sequestration process to effectively eliminate our air traffic controller service at our Cuyahoga County Airport. As I said before when these cuts were first announced, this is a key driver of our local economy. There's over $150 million worth of economic activity that is based around the airport. There are a couple thousand employees. There are 54 businesses, everything from the ones you might have heard of that are actually things like flight options that are actually conducting the flights out of there, to smaller businesses that people may not have heard of, but they're important for the people that own those businesses and that are employed by those businesses. So it's essential that we maintain this as a viable airport. And it is an airport and an asset that is helping us compete economically really across the whole world, but also regionally and across the country. When this was first announced, I asked my law department if there were any legal options whatsoever that we could pursue to try to at least delay this very ill-advised action by the FAA and the federal government. I'm standing here today with my law director, Majid Makhlouf, and I'm going to talk and have him talk a little bit about what we are filing. But basically, we're filing a legal action seeking a stay and appealing administratively the action of the FAA, and it's based on a number of grounds. And if I had to kind of boil down what the theory of our case is it is that the FAA is not really following its own policies. There's a fundamental mission, which is the fundamental mission of the FAA is to provide for aviation safety. To pull these air traffic controllers out in this very arbitrary and abrupt manner is something that has an effect on public safety. And the FAA administrator is required by statute to make a public interest determination before that decision is made, and we don't believe that that process has been followed. There is a formal safety risk management process that the FAA is supposed to go through before a closure of this type takes place. There's something called a safety management review. We don't believe that that process was followed. These processes, by the way, were established just so that these types of actions could be avoided. When it comes to public safety, especially with aviation, you don't want a government entity doing things in an arbitrary or capricious way in a manner that could affect public safety, and we believe that this is happening here. There shouldn't be any doubt, by the way, that this is a major provider of flight services in this area. And not only the flights that are taking off and landing at the Cuyahoga County Airport, but we also act as a reliever airport as well for Hopkins. There's also another provision of federal regulations which requires the FAA to perform what's called a National Environmental Practices Act assessment when a closure is proposed by the federal government. Basically, what we know as a fact is that flight operations do have an environmental impact. The flights that are currently taking off and landing at Cuyahoga County Airport have to go somewhere, and that means that air traffic will increase somewhere else, and that has environmental effects. And we also believe that the FAA failed in their duty to do that necessary environmental assessment. And then lastly, I would note that there is supposed to be a cost-benefit analysis that under the CFR, which is Code of Federal Regulations, the FAA is required, now I want to underline that they are required to conduct a cost-benefit analysis, and I'm going to quote, that whether or not the continued operation and maintenance cost less termination costs of the airport traffic towers exceed the present value. So in other words, does this make economic sense? And I think we can make a very strong case that this doesn't make economic sense. And I guess that's really our whole point here is there doesn't seem to have been much thinking or analysis at all when it comes to this decision. It's very hard to defend this decision on economic grounds, on safety grounds, on policy grounds, on environmental grounds.